head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
So sollte ich runter und zu Elizabeth kommen.
Boah, was ein epischer Effekt. Geile Scheiß, Leute. Geil.
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
I gotta run. Whoa! Oh my god.
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
Raymond can't comment on this because he knows how to. Oh my fucking god!
Fuck you! Fuck you! What the fuck?
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
Oh Jesus!
I'm coming. Coming, nigga. I'm coming.
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
Oh, shit!
Get to Elizabeth now.
Oh shit! You fucking son of a bitch!
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
Ah, shit!
Get to Elizabeth now.
Let's go get a little. Oh shit!
He was my first hope. And now,
Oh my god.
Ah, Shino.
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now. Get to Elizabeth now. Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
I gotta go all the way back down. Oh! Oh my god! Oh, fuck you!
I can keep it.
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
Okay. You don't have to talk to. Ah! Ah!
Downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
Oh, fuck!
Damn. She's talking about me? Fuck.
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
Thanks, guys. There we go. Hi, welcome to the Level Design Learning live stream. This is a new channel dedicated to learning the unusual video game profession of level design, where I offer critiques, anecdotes, and I answer viewer questions. All of these streams will be posted to the archive that is also hosted on YouTube for later viewing, in case you happen to miss today's stream or you want to revisit it later. All right, yeah, so again, I'm your host, Patrick Haslow. I'm a former commercial artist. I learned level design in the mod community for over 7 years before I actually worked in games, first in Dark Forces, then in the IdTech engine. Since then, I've spent the last 16 years in AAA game level design. And I worked on a whole bunch of different titles, from Wolfenstein multiplayer to Ghostbusters co-op to Homefront single-player multiplayer, BioShock Infinite, of course, For Honor, that was also single-player co-op multiplayer, and Gotham Knights, that was co-op as well. I'm currently an advanced level designer at WB Games Montreal. All right, so today we're looking at BioShock Infinite, specifically the level Comstock House. This was the one level of the game that I had the most direct contact with. I was sort of assigned it as mission owner to bring it to a finished level for the release of the game. This was done at Irrational Games in 2013 using the Unreal Engine 3 at the time. And yes, the credits, a lot of talented people, to be clear, a lot of talented people went into making this level. The three people whose work I dealt with most directly, in addition to the story by Ken Levine and the creative direction by Ken Levine, was Steve Allen, my major partner in the level, architect of the level, responsible for this beautiful vista we see here. And Stephen Alexander, the lead VFX artist, who did the really incredible scenes showing the terrible chaos and destruction that were wrought by the growth of the Elizabeth character's powers. All right, so with that brief intro here, what we're going to do now is we're going to play through the level, and then afterwards we're going to do a little bit of a breakdown, and we'll go over sort of the challenges in the conception of the level. We'll look at questions about the layout, and then we'll go ahead and we will dig into more stuff about the Boys of Silence. And we'll also have some live Q&A at the end. So with that in mind, let's get started. Okay. Let's see, make sure this is running smoothly. All right, so we're going to start at the very beginning here. So in this part of the game, we've traveled here with Elizabeth from, I believe it's Emporia. I played Emporia a lot less in this level, believe me. So sometimes I remember the level designers would kind of make jokes that whenever you saw a lever in the game, it was kind of, you kind of almost knew after a while that a cinematic was coming.
Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt.
This is more proof that Booker's caught between realities. Okay, so Songbird's captured Elizabeth, taking her to Comstock House. I think I watched this cutscene about 1,000,000 times while I was checking my scripting on either side of the beginning and end of it. So this level here is sort of a change of pace through the rest of the game. There's a few things that happen. One, you don't have Elizabeth for this. Elizabeth is kind of, essentially she's one of your abilities if you really think about it, so she can open tears and provide you with combat opportunities, stuff like that, restocking abilities, things like that. So at this point she's gone, and We also don't have any skyhook activity here, grappling the skyhook.
I'm not letting you take her, you hear me? Oh, you mother piece of shit! I'm not going to... Snow. It's July.
So at this point, Booker's essentially traveled through a giant rift, a giant tear, and it's snowing because he's traveled to a very different reality where, we'll see later, but there's a reason why it's snowing. It's not even the same season, the same time of year, same location.
Get your hands off of me!
So in this level we start seeing these sort of sound echoes through tears. Well, I don't remember if we start seeing them, but we see them here. And those were sort of, as designer on the mission, like those were given to me as almost like placeable actors in Unreal, right? That I would place them and there'd be a sound file assigned to them where Elizabeth would have some dialogue or other characters would have dialogue that would play out there. And it just kind of has a self-contained trigger. You get near them and the audio plays and then they vanish. One of the interesting things about this level was that as I worked on it, the script was kind of still being written. Like there was kind of an overarching story for why you were here, but I was given these sort of new dialogue bits to place either in the voxophones, the audio logs, or in these tears, and I kind of was seeing the story evolve at the same time I was making it. Like I wasn't giving a real complete blueprint of the whole story, the whole narrative.
Just take me back to my tower. Please, please.
And I had to like kind of work with the pacing here of dialogue, of like how far do you travel before you hit another tear and hear more dialogue. In this mission, sometimes I had control over where I wanted to put them, like they had to be in a certain order, definitely in the critical path, but other times like there was direct sort of mandate or dictation about where they should go, either by creative direction or the lead level designer, things like that.
Some men dream of money.
What the...
Some men dream of love. My father dreamt of a flood of fire. We were given Eden, and we turned it into Sodom. Why do we deserve salvation?
What is this place? What are you planning to do to me?
In the form of a flood. But he was not so easy on me. He said, prophet.
So yeah, another thing that comes up in this level that makes it kind of a change of pace is there's enemies that are pretty tough. There's stealth, and there's not a lot of power pickups, like not a lot of replenishing of your supplies. Like right here, we hear Elizabeth screaming in the distance, and I remember that was a specific direction from Ken Levine, where as soon as you entered the room, he wanted you to hear her screaming, which was the idea was it makes you push forward, it makes you realize something's wrong. Another thing about the sort of working process in Irrational was. It was different from other places I've worked. I actually did contribute to some of the layout of this level, where parts of it were very strongly dictated. Like for instance, that little statuary of Elizabeth that we passed through there. It's like that was necessary for the storytelling. So big parts of the critical path were built like chapters in a book, and the level architects like Steve Allen here. They were told to build certain things that told like that part of the story, right? And so that also means that like when there was combat, the level designers typically weren't building much in the way of layout for combats. Like, spaces were built like this one to a certain scale that not only told the story, but they also were built with like the proper metrics. Like, they knew how much space needed to be moved to be in the level to navigate around while you were in the middle of gunplay, or while you were fighting ranged attackers, or while you were fighting melee attackers, things like that. But yeah, it's interesting. Like every other game I've worked on, I had a much heavier hand in building the layouts, but this one, I had certain moments that I'll talk about later where I contributed, because this level came in really hot in the final game, and there's a totally different version of this original atrium here that I originally was given when the level was early on, and I feel like I kind of got away with building more things in the level because it really needed to get done, and there was sort of no time to reconcept the level. I think it had already gone through like at least 2 other iterations before I got it, and then it was kind of in a very weird limbo when I got it. So I'll go into that later. But here we start seeing these inmates, and you can see they have like this strange shimmering effect on them, and if you actually hit them, you see they don't even react to being hit, and that, which is a mystery. Like, we didn't want to really explain what that was. But that sort of staticky effect looks like the effect we see when Elizabeth brings things through tears. So it's that kind of multiversal, trans-dimensional effect. And they seem to be like lost, like they've lost their mind. They're doing things that seem full of despair, confusion. And so we wanted to hint that like they seem like this was an asylum for broken minds. And pretty much what I did is when I set up these encounters, I would place these guys. We had a really great bank of animations that our animators were giving us, and we could just place these in the world in the editor, and you'd see kind of the preview of how they look in the live editor view. So you'd place them there, and these are actually spawned AI, but right now they're scripted so that they don't respond to anything, they don't take damage, and I played this weird effect on them in Kismet, scripting them that way to tell that whole kind of story, which again to the players is kind of a mystery at this point. And this area here gives you your first chance to see it gives you a good introduction and see how things work when you encounter a Boy of Silence and you encounter the inmates nearby. So this is sort of your foreshadowing here, and it gives us a chance to use this giant elevator to block your view of the main objective, which is this massive security door that's protected by the first Boys of Silence that you see. And here you can see when he sees me, he turns yellow. The light turns yellow like he's scanning for threats. So in this area here, later we were going to have it so that you could encounter these guys as sort of a stealth-based. You could fight or stealth past them if you wanted to. But here we wanted to force you to, if you actually use the objective system we had, drew this like arrow on the floor. It tells you that you have to actually go there to that door. And we sort of funnel you so there's no place else to go but to actually start this combat. So I'm probably going to get my butt kicked here because it's been a long time since I've fought these guys. And I had to like actually steal some save files to get to this point in the game. And in these particular save files, this guy did not have a lot of ammunition or salts for his vigors, so we're going to just trap the area first. Let's see how that goes. Maybe that works okay. I'll set up some traps in areas where I can fight them later. I think I'm out of salts. There's one over here though. Yeah, like I said, there's not a lot of ammunition on this level. I think there's a pistol over here we gave you. Small health kit and a pistol. I'll replace the shotgun with a pistol because there's more ammo there. So if I die, I guess it won't be surprising, but we'll see. See how it goes. And they don't even get affected by these traps yet. Okay, I guess that'll do. So So I'll just start combat with this guy. So he sees me if I don't get away in time. He screams and alerts everybody and sort of brings them into this reality here. Run to my traps over here. That's it. Okay. So with the inmates dispatched.
Damn it! I gotta find a way in.
So
I
we
hope I don't have to go all the way up to the Warden's office to get in.
So yes, we do have to go all the way up to the Warden's office. So this is just some really great classic design here, where you see your objective, it's blocked, and you have to find a way through and explore the level, and this becomes kind of the anchor point to the level, where this is the critical path, but now you know that like you have to somehow get way up there. You can't see it from here, but you do know that it's on the 3rd floor. So we try to use the intercom.
Alright. Listen, I just want to see the girl. What were those?
There's some creepy sounds.
Just gotta get to the Warden's office.
Please, what is this place? Just send me back to my tower.
It's too late for that now, child. Your father gave you a lovely home, and you chose to destroy it.
He's not my father.
So yeah, one of the challenges of this level was this game had a huge script. It was something like 500-page script, or maybe more, and there was such a density of narrative information and audio and stuff like that we had to find spaces when we designed this level to allow for that pacing of one after the next bit of narrative. So this one, for instance, has a tear come down in the elevator. Then there's also a voxophone.
I suppose the siphon is a kind of leash. Yes, my father put it on me. But when the time came, neither did I remove it myself. What would happen if I took off the leash, and I found I was as obedient as ever?
So here we get a bit of foreshadowing hint at Elizabeth and older Elizabeth, and something about the siphon, which we later see is a thing that's like keeping her powers in check. So yeah, so this is again more scripting of the inmates. Like this guy here, I gave you the chance to frame the first sort of encounter again with the boys of silence. So you see that light moving, and you know like what you're in for. You know that there's a boys of silence there, and you can either choose to sneak by or not.
My father, I can see all that would be, might be, and must not be.
And we got a lot of propaganda from Elizabeth, speaking like she never did before, like some kind of autocrat. So here we see a boy of silence. We have a choice. We can go towards the shiny door, which is our first bit of kind of narrative, or we can search around for goodies, basically. So we find over here. This level makes a lot of sense in terms of like how it's structured. Like, but we do a lot of things since the level's in disarray. So this is kind of a dystopian version of this asylum. It gives us the opportunity to make the layout like hierarchically make sense as the way this place would actually be run as a working asylum. But we add destruction and things like that to allow us the chance to force the player to walk through it in a very certain path so that the story can be told. Because it was, again, narrative was king at Irrational Games. So like we had to do everything we could to make sure that that the story would be uninterrupted and you could play through and make sure you experience it. So we find kind of like an operating room.
Child, would you like to pray with me?
You're hurting me. Please just let me go.
We're going to cure you.
I'm not sick.
Your spirit is. All I ever wanted is to see you live up to your potential.
So yeah, that's a little flashback through a tear of, I guess, when Elizabeth is being experimented on here in this operating room. So this doesn't make sense to Booker at this point because like he just saw Elizabeth, so he's like hearing bits of a past that don't really add up according to what he's seen in his experience so far. So again, another area for voxophones. Again, all these areas here were dictated by narrative, by creative direction, like this whole operating room area, this sort of burning of, I guess, operations that didn't work out, burning of corpses. At this point, I kind of went through and I placed like the narrative elements like voxophones and weapons.
I suppose the siphon is a kind of leash. Yes, my father put it on me. But when the time came, neither did I remove it myself. What would happen if I took off the leash and I found I was as obedient as ever?
Interesting. That's the same one as in the elevator. That could have been requested to make sure you heard it for sure. I don't know. Or it could be an oversight. It was left in the level. It's been a long time, so I'm not sure. But I'm kind of surprised to hear that. I think I'll grab the hand cannon. Yeah. Okay. So we move on. And there's all these really clear, really clear signage, almost like to make it really clear, like where the inmates are supposed to go and the lives they want them to lead. It's sort of to indoctrinate their troubled minds. Yes, this is like there's a very religious aspect to Colombia in general, for sure, as evidenced by the intro baptism scene. So yeah, it all kind of fits. It's almost like in this version, Elizabeth is kind of indoctrinated in that as well when you hear her speaking kind of autocratically over the loudspeakers.
I'm Dr. Pettifalk, Elizabeth, and I'll be taking care of you.
Get away from me.
Defiant, even after all this time. DeWitt just left you here. You need to give up on him, love.
He will come.
Yeah, so again, for all he knows, that could have happened very recently. Although there's no other building in Colombia that looks like this in disrepair, which is kind of a confusing aspect for the player as well. So there's a nice sort of slow reveal to these things. So these areas here, I had more of a hand, like when there was sort of a combat area, like the first area just off the elevator, or this one. I had more of a hand in placing props, at least in a general sense. Sometimes they were just blocks. Other times I actually put like props here. Like this guy, I wanted him to be sitting on a bed, so I actually put a bed there and put him there. But I kind of made the layout so it was difficult to get through. I actually kind of I had to in a sense, program the Boy of Silence, who acts like a security camera. You can see, like, he has a pattern if you watch him, and you figure it out. Like, he turns, he remains in one position for a certain time, the light shines in a certain position for a certain amount of time, and then he'll move again. So there's all these intervals in his behavior, and that actor was programmed by the gameplay programmers and given to me, and I kind of chose how I would, where I'd make him look for what amount of time and that kind of thing. And I'd have that, I'd have the geo around him placed to complement the sort of stealth gameplay that I wanted to have there. Let's see if I can sprint by him. You also can't get too close to him where he'll go off that way as well.
The specimen needs to be destroyed. We couldn't even hold her in that tower, and now the Prophet...
Destroy the lamb? His heir?
If we modify the procedure, we could... It would be safer for everyone. It would seem an accident.
So yeah, this is one of these areas, like I said, we tried to design the level for this very dense narrative that was going on, and it's tricky, right? Because there's a lot of areas where if you sneak through and you're careful enough, you'll get a clean experience. Like you'll encounter this terror like I did with nothing going on. But you could easily alert the Boy of Silence, have all the inmates coming after you, and you could run into this terror. So it's like at times things were closer than I would have liked. But new bits of information were being sort of given to me all the time, like as the level was being worked on. Like, oh, here's another terror we want in the level, here's another voxophone. And I'd oftentimes be kind of stuck trying to figure out exactly, where I could put it that it wouldn't be disrupted, but it wasn't 100% possible. Yeah. So, thanks. I see some more people join the stream. Thanks, Killer, for 4041. Some new people I haven't seen before. Subei, Mar Simon. The design of the Boy of Silence, I thought he was really noise sensitive when I first played, so I didn't run or anything. Yeah, that's a fair point. I forget if we talked about having him actually be a little bit noise sensitive. But I think it was like we needed to keep it simple. And the light was the thing that was clearly dangerous, right? Like we made it so that you can clearly see the cone and you know when you're going to be detected. So we stuck with that, I believe. Alright, so here we go. Here we enter kind of another combat space, and for my taste this was always a little too close. Like we get out here and we get spotted by these security cameras, which is rough. Because especially rough if you just alerted the lunatics out there. Here we get attacked by, let's see, I'm going to use my possession power on the turret. Here we get attacked by this guy. Yes, this is rough. This is a hard fight. That's what I mean. To me, that design is a little weak. Like I said, I died there just trying to fight. Not even with the lunatics around. That guy jumped on top of this thing. Interesting. This guy doesn't kill himself when he's possessed. Okay, yeah, so that's a little rough. In retrospect, maybe yeah, maybe didn't need the crow guy. So yeah, Sub-AI, I'll be happy to answer questions like that after the rest of the stream. I'll have a Q&A at the end for sure. So
You're not
hold tight.
eating enough. Is something the matter?
I'm not hungry.
You'll need to eat sooner or later. If you hold out for DeWitt, you'll just starve to death. Come now.
Okay, so here we see a really clear view of like the warden's office. And we also see the elevator. We kind of come back to the other side of the atrium that we entered earlier.
In return for his gifts, Eve and her apple, Sodom and Gomorrah. Humanity wrote a bad check, and the blood was the only way to settle accounts. For what is Columbia, if not a different arc
So yeah,
in a different time?
here we see again, this is where we build the level in a way that makes sense. We close off areas we don't want you to get to yet, or in general, because we're trying to sort of steer the player along a path to tell a story. So we use that by like gating off like the security area. We can't actually get in from here. We find the ways blocked this way. So we're sort of forced off to the side to circle around the atrium. It's kind of the way we were on the floor below.
The child is ready. It's time.
Prophet, even if we cure her, why do you think she'll do what you ask?
My daughter has two problems, Doctor. One is the condition that science will cure her of. The other affliction is of a spiritual nature.
What affliction is that?
Hope.
Yeah, I think the strange thing about the Echo is, for some reason today, it's like the my headset is picking up a little bit of the earpiece of my I should say that the mic on the headset's picking up a little bit of the earpiece of that. But yeah, I can't really explain what's going on there. So yeah, that was a bit of foreshadowing of one of the inmates again.
Your surgery is tomorrow, you know. You better eat. Oh, you still expect DeWitt to burst in and rescue you, don't you? It's been 6 months.
6 months.
So here, at this point, see, finally we reveal to DeWitt that something's really not right here at all. Like they're talking to Elizabeth as if it's been 6 months. Yeah, and this is another great area that Steve Allen built, like that was like dictated by the story needs, involving pretty much like a workshop for where the inmates work, to give them something to do, a profession kind of in their day-to-day activities, how it used to operate when it was fully functional, really. So we go here and we see there's another Boy of Silence. I think there might have been, earlier on, I might have set up like 3 different areas. But then I think one of them had to go because, like I said, more and more narrative content kept coming in. And because that was the main point of the level, like, not only just to break up the gameplay, but also to like tell this whole story of one of Elizabeth's possible futures. We had to focus on that, so one of the Boys of Silence encounters had to go. I don't remember exactly where it was, but yeah, this was I think the last one, maybe. Sneak around that guy.
girl and wipe away the debt. But in the end, he is the one who'll have to pay down all of our accounts, won't he? Where does his guilt start? And mine end?
So, yeah, so now we can see the warden's office from this side. So a couple questions. So you said sub AI. What do the directing in this level do only lighter objects? I'm not sure what you mean by directing. You mean like what I did in it, or what the artist did, or I'm not sure what you were asking on that. Yeah, and Benito, definitely, like, we were kind of limited in how much we could do with tears, the sort of multiversal thing in tears. We had to kind of save it for like the really high drama moments, which we'll see later. So here we have kind of an educational area off to the side. This was pretty clever, I thought. This is how he worked out how you get into the warden's office without actually going through the security gates.
But in the end, he abandoned me to serve his own needs. But in some ways, I thank him. He showed me exactly how much faith our species deserved.
So yeah, this is a clever kind of like, almost like an unusual, atypical route to the warden's office. Like, in other words, normally they indoctrinate people here in this sort of like little theater, and people can watch from this like private room where they used to have like security glass, like one-way glass. But now it's been broken over the course of time, and you can actually, it gives you this sort of hidden path to get into the warden's office.
I followed a man who seemed to be everything my father was not.
So, Sabaya, you're asking about you're asking about how you sort of direct a player through the level? I'm trying to figure out exactly what you mean.
To be found.
I mean, there's a lot of ways. Sometimes it's sound, like at the very beginning of the level when you hear Elizabeth screaming in the distance, and it leads you to the Boy of Silence and the security door. That was kind of the first way we did it. Other times in the level you see, well, I should say, let me see. Other times you see, we sort of funnel you in other ways, right? Like, in other words, you can't go that way. Oops. You can't go that way, right there, because it's blocked. Also, initially, when we walked around, when we went left from entering the locked off security office, you know, we saw like there was a light there. Light's probably a big deal in this level. Like, the Boys of Silence typically, not only do they alert you where to go, but they also make it, they kind of scare you, but they also make it clear like you're gonna have to go past that scary moving light. Other times it's like just a collapsed light there that was sort of on the ground as you went left from the security office. So it's a few different ways, but this level is pretty linear, and even though we hint at what's up ahead, like right there, that's pretty clear. There's literally a sign telling you Warden's office right there. So I mean, there's nothing, this isn't like an open world level where you need more like subtle ways of showing you which way to go. So oftentimes it's like there's story components compelling you forward, like I need to get to the Warden's office as Booker DeWitt, and there's multiple signs telling you where to go. And there's also, like if you really get lost, there's the arrow telling you to go that way. It's kind of nice, like in the game, in some of the bigger environments, like in Columbia, you would use this more, but I found like it's pretty rare I'd see anybody using it in Comstock House because it was more of a directed experience. So this is the security office. It's kind of like a police station inside the level where the guards would be. We met a couple guards in the beginning of or when we came around this area the first time, and we fought the turrets and the crow guy. I wish I could remember his name, it's been a long time. But here, there's some exploration to do, which is kind of fun.
As the days pass,
we can restock. We
I
can
believe
listen to
less
Elizabeth.
in God and more in Lutece. My powers shrivel as my regrets blossom. All of this because my father failed me. By the time I realized how far I'd gone, it was too late to stop it. But there is still one last chance at redemption for both of us.
So yeah, we get to hear more of older Elizabeth's voice there, which again is another mystery. We hear two Elizabeths in this level. We hear the older Elizabeth, who seems to have a lot of regrets and contemplation, and then we hear the autocratic Elizabeth over the loudspeakers. It seems almost like she's running this place. So it's all kind of mysterious. At the time, what's funny is, like, I wasn't given the whole story, and it was kind of, like I said, it was kind of being written as time went on. So I would get these little snippets of information, new voxophones to place with new audio files, new dialogue to play over the loudspeakers, and I kind of saw it take shape as I worked on the level. Again, it's a very unusual way of working. I would say a lot of other studios don't work that way, but I felt like because narrative was the main driving part of the entertainment in this world, it was split between the actual playable story and the actual environmental narrative of the world it was taking place in. So I feel like that was that's kind of how that was. So how do you balance exploration versus linear paths in this kind of game? Also, will we see some images of early Blockouts, etc., or is it under NDA? We're going to see my memory recreated versions of Blockouts and stuff. I'm going to show you some of that stuff. There's some stuff I can show that's not under any NDA, so I wouldn't worry about it. But I don't have any actual assets, to be clear, except some personal stuff that I did. So we'll definitely get to that. How do you balance exploration versus linear paths? In this kind of game. Again, here's the interesting thing is, typically, most of this stuff was not built by the level designers. Like, I know, like, if you look online for stuff about level design, you see a ton of stuff about blockouts, right? And you see a lot less about scripting, a lot less about pacing, a lot less about narrative, a lot less about combat design. So my answer to this question kind of goes along with, 1 second. Yeah, my answer to this kind of goes along with how the level architects built these spaces. They built them like real spaces, like what would be needed in a giant tower-shaped, high-security kind of asylum like this. So they built it with areas where, first they built it like an area that would really exist. So they built it with things like, you know, this indoctrination room here. They built it with the operating theater. They built it with the sleeping quarters, the workshop, things like that. And they built it with you know, with paths that circle around the atrium for you to like go around the whole thing. And basically, the way the freedom that I had to work with this was, I had to determine, like, well, sort of the micro of the critical path, right, from objective to objective. So in other words, like, and the level architect knew this too, like, you have to go upstairs to reach, you know, to reach the actual warden's office and the switch that opens the security door on the first floor. So what it means is you build a lot of side areas that loop around and come back to the main path. So in other words, like, these areas here are not necessary completely, right? Like, we could have built this so you go up, and this is kind of someone made a joke about this online once, but a lot of the buildings in BioShock Infinite involved a grand staircase splitting off into 2 staircases on the side, which is true a lot, But to be fair, that's a very common, in this kind of architecture, that's a very common grandiose style you might have seen in the architectural plans of these sort of like Beaux-Arts buildings. It's not really uncommon. But say here, for example, we kind of echo it and we make small loops here with kind of interrogation chambers or interrogation areas off to the side. So we theme them like this. The architect themes them like this, but then it makes it like an exploration area where you can find, you know, assaults, things like that. Down here there's like clerical stuff on the main floor. You know, so you can kind of see like, first you come up with the sort of like realistic hierarchical structure of the area, of a realistic functioning space, and then you decide which areas of it do you need to block off, or which areas do you need to let the player go through to reach the main parts of the critical path.
There's the switch.
So in case you didn't know, Booker says there's the switch. I remember this voxophone, I ended up putting this here. I think it was asked to be put here. I kind of wish it wasn't right here.
What I've done cannot be undone. I cannot stop what I have put in motion. But perhaps I can keep it from ever starting.
Yeah, so
He was
here
my first
I
hope.
felt like
And now
it's important, obviously, for the story.
is my last.
But I feel like it's there because the switch is here, right? And the switch is like you've been traveling the whole level to open this door. And I don't remember the order in which things happened. Like, as we know, 3 things happen here. It's a lot to process, right? It's kind of a little much. There's opening the security gate, which is the whole reason you came up here in the first place, right? This is like everything you discovered along the way, the fights you had, the weirdnesses of the asylum, everything. The tears, the voxophones. It's all stuff you found a way on your quest. Your only quest was to get here. It was important for the story, but now you're opening the door, and not only that, you get surprised, as you saw in the opening video, you get surprised by a boy of silence here, as a jump scare. The only jump scare in the game, I think. And in addition to that, there's this other bit of important information about sort of older Elizabeth's long journey and the more hints you get about what that was. So it's like a lot of stuff, and the voxophone can be playing while you're pulling this lever, and it can still be playing while you're actually fighting the Boy of Silence. So there's like, I tried to limit overlap of these things, and I feel like this was a lot in one space. I think like the better choice would have been the jump scare and the switch, or the voxophone and the switch. I feel like 3 is too much because it's one of those things. I don't know, I guess the voxophone could have been, like, it could have been maybe right there. I don't know, it's tricky. It's definitely tricky because the player can interact with anyone in any order. Alright, so open the security gate.
Should be able to head downstairs and get to Elizabeth now.
And to be fair, I did not come up with this idea of the jump scare. This was after we developed all the stealth through the whole level. The idea was we'd heighten the tension with the player, right? And then we'd pay it off with this like final, like, even if you were really good at avoiding all the Boys of Silence, you would finally get caught here, sort of, right? So that was kind of the fun of that. And this is also, the way it was described to me is this is like it's a reference also, like a gameplay reference, call back to the famous dentist splicer scare, jump scare that happens when you turn around in the first BioShock. So just trap this area a little bit because this is gonna get rough if I don't. love the possession vigor. It's still one of my favorites. There you are. Oh, he's dead. Sorry. Somebody's still here. I just don't know where they are. As you can tell, there was a dynamic music system in the game, which you see in a lot of games. When there's still this kind of tense music playing, it means there's a threat around. And normally it ends and there's a stinger telling you stuff's over when you defeated all the enemies, but this is telling me there's still somebody around here, so that's interesting. I thought I got everybody, but... This is kind of convenient, the placement of these shotguns. Thought this would be nice before you kind of do your final battle. Fun fact, you can actually, in this combat, you can actually use the, I didn't use it here, but you can use the charge vigor to actually sort of like zoom across this atrium and like smack the guy on the opposite platform, which is kind of awesome. Yeah, so if you recall the first time we came through here, this was gated off. So again, it gave me the options here like to make a more like efficient use of like a limited space. We keep changing the paths through it. Like right here, obviously, you can go out and leave the security office through the now open gate here. And then again, across the way, originally this was gated off. Now we open it up and we make it look like it was opened up by the security forces when the Boy of Silence alarm went off. So that's kind of how that works. So now the objective is to rescue Elizabeth, which has kind of been your objective the whole mission. So now we can go back down the stairs, and it seems that opening the security door down below has also like opened up the elevator access here as well. So now we see a mystery voxophone that's been placed here in the elevator going down. That was one of the other nice things about adding the elevator in, was it gave us this opportunity to do small kind of what they call walk and talks.
Tomorrow the leash comes off, because all of this has to end. But even if I destroy the siphon, will I be strong enough to see all the doors and open whichever I choose? And if I bring him here, who is to say that he would be any match for the monsters I have created?
Yeah, that's a good question, Benito, about are there any powers that could give you trouble in designing the level? I think that charge one was tricky. Anyone where you're going to zoom a player across an expanse to give them like a spontaneous grapple point, that's a little rough. This level, I can't say any of the powers gave me trouble. I did some kind of interesting things here, right? Like when we fought the inmates, I set them up so the inmates didn't give you loot when you killed them. That was kind of the scarcity thing we wanted to make in this level. So when you killed guys, you weren't just restocking. You were getting attacked by throngs of guys. And so as far as designing the level goes, it was more like, not really the powers themselves, but trying to make it so that everything that you fought, everything you encountered, didn't allow you a chance to like catch your breath very well. So it kind of, we wanted to kind of like encourage you to be stealthy. some players were really good at resource management anyway, and they still like blasted their way through the level with no problem. Like they just trapped the hell out of areas, and made sure the lunatics were, or the inmates or whatever we called them at the time, that they were going to die like as soon as they were alerted, or pretty close. So okay, here we're back down at the main objective. We can see it's open. We saw this on the sort of retro 1984 black and white CCTV in the Warden's office, but here we can see it actually did open. And we hear Elizabeth screaming.
Elizabeth, hold tight!
We get a chance to restock here. Now we can see, surprise, it was all a tear.
What is it? Why do you ask what?
When the delicious question is when.
Lives, lived, will live.
Dies, died, will die.
And here we see the Lutesses, who are sort of trans-dimensional ambassadors, telling us that there's basically more to what's going on with Elizabeth than we really know. And here we see a really ominous scene.
As you can see, Booker, the lunatics are running the asylum. They don't even listen to me anymore. All I can do is watch as what I set into motion slides into its terminal stage. It took all I had left in me just to bring you here.
Elizabeth, I don't understand. I heard you screaming. I was coming to get you. Are we...
Here. Take my hand.
Yeah, so this whole sequence here, this is, I believe this is the... Well, here we can see it's the operating theater, but we can't... It's actually shut down now, which is interesting, right? We can't actually go in there. But it seems like that's maybe where Elizabeth was screaming from in a different reality. And here we see... well, we can hear it's old Elizabeth. And this whole area, this whole reveal here, this whole thing was created, especially the next sequence, with the help of Stephen Alexander, who did this, these amazing effects. If I'm wrong about any of this, someone will correct me at some point. But yeah, so this is where we see, this is the Elizabeth who brought us here, the reason we're in this strange, ruined version of Columbia. No, the enemies are not randomized here. These are all very, very handpicked.
The seed of the prophet shall sit the throne and drown in flame the mountains of man. Say what you will about Comstock. He was a hell of a fortune teller. Wasn't the torture that broke me. Wasn't the indoctrination. It was time. Time rots everything, Booker. Even hope.
I was coming.
Songbird. He always stops you.
Yes, but I would find a way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like now everything's about multiverses going on between like the Flash movie coming up and the whole Marvel thing, and it's like interestingly this this whole game like played with it heavily long before it became like in vogue in pop culture, you know. So yeah, this is the darkest future that could happen with Elizabeth and her powers and all this. And Columbia wreaking havoc on the one version of the model world in 1984. Yeah, and this is the kind of thing, like, I didn't work on this part at all. This incredible vista of New York City, like, one day this just kind of showed up in my level. I knew that there was going to be the scene at some point, that it was placeholder. And then I just started playing it one day, and that whole reveal was there, and it really blew me away. So yeah, now we see we're back in the floor is restored. We see the operating theater.
Before she...
Yep.
There's still time.
And now Booker understands he's back in 1912 in his own time. And now he has to rescue Elizabeth.
Elizabeth!
So now we're back to more standard BioShock Infinite combat. No more Bows of Silence. Greater variety of enemies.
If she gets ornery, just hit her with the machines. Comstock! What are you doing to her? Let her be!
Mr. Durant, what's the expression?
Right, so now we see here, like, these are the siphons, things that are drawing Elizabeth's power so she can't use it.
Maybe if I shut down those machines from upstairs.
So now we get a new objective. Again, I didn't do this was a really good layout. It perfectly encapsulates the player objectives, the story, everything. Yep, and we're reunited here with Comstock.
She is not your daughter.
Being angry at you again for ruining all his plans, corrupting his daughter. Yeah, so here we see the objectives. We see turn off the machines. We see like these clear things we have to reach over on the sides. We see Elizabeth there, which is our ultimate goal. Is the whole thing has been trying to get back to Elizabeth. And then we're kind of shunted off. Our only path is one way. And again, this is the very... Actually, this gives us two ways too, now that I think of it, which is kind of nice. But the level design many times was done this way, where things were split in two, left and right. Again, that was kind of a high-level architect choice. At times, I feel like it was difficult to make the choices feel meaningful. Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does. In this case, we can go left or right. I'd be curious to see how many people went right, how many people went left. So I did a few things here. Like originally, there wasn't any combat here. They just knew like you had to get to the machines, right? So I turned these hallways into combat spaces. I placed a pedestal with a sentry gun. Like I just kind of tried to design a combat encounter. I missed him.
Any last words?
Probably gonna die. Thanks, buddy.
My skin disappears sometimes.
Of course, the M-rated finisher. Yeah, so someone asked before about the number of enemies determined at the previous door. I'll definitely talk about the combat design later on. We see another one of these things. No assaults left.
Where'd he go?
Well, again, when I talk about, there's a few more questions here, when I talk about level architect, that's sort of every studio is structured a little differently. This happens to be like kind of how it was at Irrational Games back then. I feel like the structure of the studio was based around what they needed to do to convey like a very heavily narrative game, right? Okay, that's interesting. I thought previously there was an armored, what do you call it, motorized Patriot enemy here, but I don't see him. So this is like I added little touches like this. Like I said, this whole area was built. The whole like structure of this place and how it functioned was built by the level architect. I added details like to flesh out the narrative when I could. It's like that's that's sometimes what you find as a level designer when you're working on a game is you don't have control over everything. You're not a creative director, you're not a level design director, but you sort of, if things are set up right in the studio, it's like you're given areas that you can actually add your input to it and flesh out the plans to fit in well with the overall game. And here, for example, we had these characters, like this is not a real AI. Like you see that he stands still. He gets scared when I get close, when he sees me. These are kind of like just an animated mesh. So we use these guys all over Colombia, like the regular citizenry, like in certain times when a fight would break out near citizens, they would kind of just get scared like this a lot of times, right? And if you hit them, they go down. They're really simple. So, like to make this more believable, I just decided to add extra doctors up here to the control rooms, and just add a power up. So there was a little more like story being told here than just a switch and nothing else in the room. So there's little things like that. This is the first switch. And I was given the audio lines to play there, and just script it so that they play when you pull the switches, things like that. Oh, there he is. Forgot. Okay, these guys come out when you pulled one switch. Okay, so that's part of my combat design that I didn't even remember. Good times.
Rejoice, for death has no sting.
I'm going to die. Yeah, my health got really wasted before with that one guy. I'm gonna go with the electrical one again, the shock trap.
We hold these truths to be
Ooh. Hurt. Ooh, okay. Sorry guys, I'm probably gonna bite it here again. This guy will not. Yep. Yeah, so how do I put this? Oh yeah, there's one other thing we had to do in the game frequently. This is kind of a side thing, and I used it at a few places in this level. Is we had these things when we scripted the combat encounters. We had these things that the gameplay programmers gave us called spatial restriction volume. What it means is yeah, so we had these things called spatial restriction volumes, and basically you'd put a volume into a level, like say I didn't want AI to leave this room, which they did, but or say I didn't want them to like run up and chase me all the way up here and fight a whole bunch of troops like way up here in this little corner. I would put a spatial restriction volume like extending maybe only to this little lobby here. So the AI, once they're spawned in, they wouldn't leave that area. They'd be kind of tethered to it. Let's pick up the Gatling gun, why not? Yeah, so that was part of the tools we had to design combat encounters. Actually, before I was given this level as a sort of the mission owner, I was actually just brought in to do combat scripting like throughout the game. There's a whole bunch of combats throughout Colombia that I scripted. But again, I didn't build the actual parts of the city. I just put combats in them. Okay, we'll do this. This is an incredible sequence here. Stephen Alexander pulled off. Where Elizabeth's power is released, and as revenge and defense, she conjures up an image of a Kansas field tornado, pretty much. Wipes away and destroys her assailants, insurgents. And, okay.
Elizabeth, I'll be right there!
So release Elizabeth now. I think this is still here, right? No. Okay, so we're coming close to the end of this, I think. See, I had to technically not script those sequence of events, but set up the
Just do it.
this. How do I put this? Set up all the player interactions that would lead to, say, like these small cinematic type moments.
Help me with this.
And, you know, like script like press X to tie corset, that kind of thing.
What is it?
Just read it.
Your dream of New York happens.
Respawn checkpoints.
It's me. I'm the one who...
Yes, that's something the level designer had to do. Especially like, that's kind of when I was talking about combat design in the space you didn't build. It's like you have to like look at the space, figure out where's the best place for the combat, and then figure out where's the best space before that to respawn, for example. Yeah.
Moralizing, Booker. You forget. I know you.
I'm not going to let you kill him.
Really? Booker? What are you going to do to stop me?
Not a damn thing. Because I'm going to do it for you.
Okay. Now we see how Elizabeth powers have grown. And, yeah. So I think at this point, you pretty much leave and you return.
Tomorrow the leash comes off. Because all of this has to end. But even if I destroy the siphon, will I be strong enough to see all the doors and open whichever
Gotta find the prophet.
Comstock's Zeppelin is outside. The hand of the prophet, he calls it.
When did you learn that?
I've been here for a while.
How long?
Long enough.
So yeah, time was dilated while you were looking for her, and
Comstock got what he wanted from me. Because he is not going to have long to use it.
So yeah, this is pretty much the end of the level. I think the last thing we did...
Can you open this?
Seems easy enough.
...was we included...
there you go.
Like, when you talked about, like, exploration levels, this one kind of made it easy. We just build, like, little nooks and crannies where you can find extra stuff. Here's, like, a power-up to increase... health or salts, that kind of thing.
Just what the doctor ordered.
See, I think originally we had this where this was just a spot to see Comstock talking, overseeing the siphoning of Elizabeth, and then actually I remember Zach McClendon, I think, suggested we actually make this an accessible area where you could enter after Comstock leaves and grab the pickups. So yeah, it's one of those things, like, you try to make sense, you try to, like, find extra areas and exploit them and see if you can expend the resources and time to make them look nice. Because, for example, like, originally this was an area where only Comstock was seen from the entrance point. So it didn't have to have anything in it. But if we want to make it so you can enter it later, we have to, like, we have to place windows so you can see it as a tantalizing thing to get to. We actually have to decorate the inside, obviously, to make it, like, up to par visually as the rest of the game. So those are the kind of things like when you're planning out those explorable spaces, you have to, in AAA anyway, there's always this question of like how much time and money are you going to put into areas that only some players will see. It's tricky, right? Like you're not building an open world, especially in a game like this. It's not an open world. Look, it has an expansive idea of a big city, but it's clearly not an open world, so you have to kind of use your resources wisely. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of the actual Comstock House level. So let's see here. Next, we're going to go back to our presentation. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about now some of the level design goals. All right, so when I first got the level, it was, you see it originally in the game when you're in the section of Columbia called Emporia. And you see it in the distance as your objective to get there. And you can see that it's like this really tall structure. So we knew that once you were inside the building, it's not a contiguous world. Like, in effect, the interior spaces of a level like Comstock House are kind of like a dungeon. Like, you can't just pop in outside and you can't just pop in and out from outside to inside. So the original level layout wasn't really conveying the verticality very well. I don't remember, I think it went through maybe a couple iterations before I got to it, but that was sort of one of the goals. And like I said before, we needed to plan out the space with a high density of storytelling. And I know I talked before about level architects, generally speaking, at Irrational, building out most of the spaces. And they did. But in my experience, like, because I'm not really sure exactly why, I think it was the production timetable we were on, I probably got to contribute more to the layout than was typical in the sort of pipeline that we had for building these levels. And in doing so, I had to make enough sort of runway for the player to get from point A at the bottom to point B at the top, but would also have enough time for us to tell our story. And like I said, I didn't have the whole story at the beginning of the game. We kept adding in more additional scenes, voxophones and terrors, so that was definitely something that had to be there. We had to define the Boys of Silence gameplay. It hadn't been done yet, late in development. We'd actually, I think maybe even prior to my beginning working at Irrational, they'd actually teased the Boy of Silence as one of the, and they did also later called this advertising campaign called the Heavy Hitters, where they showed like the kind of mini boss type characters that were in Columbia, including like the Handyman and the Boys of Silence and the, who else was in there? Like the Motorized Patriot, things like that. So there wasn't really a clear idea of what the Boy of Silence gameplay was going to be like. They were more just this really freaky concept that was very entertaining, like as just a cool, like weird retro science fiction concept. So we had to figure that out. And also because of that, we had to define the combat encounter design. This was an enclosed space, like you didn't have, for a huge part of Comstock House until you return to the present day, I didn't have the flexibility as a combat designer to use the complete array of AI that were in the rest of the game, like all the archetypes like snipers and shotgun guys, and I had like a limited ability. I had like I had the inmates, I had the guards, and the Boys of Silence. So I had to figure out how they could mix together to have sort of a unique flavor that was different as kind of an interlude in the rest of the game. And so in the level design layout planning, there were spatial challenges. Again, the vertical progression was a thing. Seen here is a picture of the security office, the Warden's office, where we unlock the door at the main level. So we knew, being such a vertical level, how were we going to make that a good flow for the player, make them not feel like they're in just kind of a corridor shooter all the way through, and make the level feel like it was set up realistically the way a very tall building would be set up. That was the first challenge. Also, an early iteration of the level involved staircases. In a level that big, you don't want to be climbing staircases all the time. It's not pleasant. It kind of, even though there are staircases in tall buildings, it feels kind of jarring, and it doesn't feel like something that you would want. And it contributes to that idea of sort of it being like you stuck in corridors, and not getting a sense of the bigger building if you're just going up staircases all the time. Again, we needed to allow for narrative moments, not just the narrative moments of the main story with Elizabeth and the whole multiverse thing, but also the story of what's going on in the asylum. You know, the whole thing of like, does it make sense as a space? Is there good environmental storytelling? And again, combat encounters. Where can we have the combat encounters? Which ones make sense for the points in the story, and which one makes sense for the spaces we have to build them in? So yeah, I can come back to that question later. That's kind of it's kind of a big question, and it kind of is heavily dependent on the studio that you work at. But I feel like once we get to talking about combat design and encounter design and that kind of thing later in the live stream, I feel like we can definitely and probably will touch on that. All right. So I'm going to look a little bit here at the blockout. And this is, to be clear, this is not the blockout of from the original game. This is kind of a recreation I made here. And let me just find my window, sorry. Right, okay, so we're back. Okay, so yeah, so this is a recreation of Comstock House's atrium, the open center of the building. And let's have a look at so I'm going to show you an approximation of what was there when I got it. A lot of questions were left unanswered, hadn't been dealt with yet, but this is basically it. When you came in, and I think I'll probably just hit full screen here, makes it a little easier. Okay, there we go. Right, so I'm just going to toggle, there we go. So when you came in, I recall I came in here, I believe there was a security door, like this part of the level was still here. You went to the security door. It was kind of a big open space with an atrium. We knew that up above was the security door switch. We knew we had to get there. But it was kind of a big open atrium, and all there was a staircase leading up. And I don't think it, like, at the time it was early, and I don't think it went all the way to the top. It was more like the beginnings of the sketch of how you would get upstairs were there. And I just felt like going up staircases, like, it's harder to have good fights on a lot of staircases. That's one problem. On the other, it doesn't make for as interesting a trip up to the top. There's nothing really unifying the whole space other than like sort of crawling around in a circle endlessly and going up staircases. And also when I came in, I just got attacked by the inmates, right? Like I came in, I think after I checked the door, the inmates just kind of like came running down the stairs and attacked me, and I didn't know why they saw me. It's like they were just kind of like, they were essentially just like zombies. Like they just came at you to kill you no matter what you did, where you were. I didn't feel like there was any real any storytelling happening with them, anything like that. I felt like this space was just, and again, it was early. This isn't a criticism on anybody who worked on it at the time, because again, I don't really know all the backstory when I got it. I just know this is what was there essentially. And I knew it couldn't stay this way, though, given all those concerns I had before. So let me switch over to this, which again is our more or less our finished version. So what I did here, I'm going to go back into, let's see. Back into the final version so I can just fly around here with the controller. Right. So you asked how long did it take you to do this in the game 10 years ago? You mean to do a blockout like this? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, like, I worked on this for like maybe about the last year. So from that version, that original version I showed you, to what you saw in the game, I guess, yeah. And I mean, Steve Allen, the level architect, did a tremendous job on this thing, and he spent a whole lot of time. But the unusual thing that I did was, when I actually did throw in sort of suggestions for the level art based on the needs I thought we had for level design, I was taking the meshes we'd already built for the game, which is not normally how you work, or maybe how you even should work. You probably want to keep it in Blockout to make it clear, but like, we didn't really have time for that because some things were set in stone. So what I did was, as soon as I looked at this giant open space, I thought, well, a building this tall would have an elevator. That's kind of like obvious, but I thought, well, that'll also tie everything together. And it's like one thing came after the other. I put together a whole bunch of meshes, and I put together this elevator in the center of the level, which was made to look really pretty by the level architect. But essentially, I was able to build it. I put the statues in here to add to that sort of grandiose Columbia sort of idea. I also thought, like, if we're going to have the Boys of Silence in here, and I don't think I knew exactly how the gameplay was going to be yet, but I thought we're going to need sort of a space where you introduce them, right? And I thought the security door should be where you introduce the Boys of Silence. Later, some really great things were fleshed out by the art team. Like, if you recall, there was that image that actually says "No sin escapes their gaze." You see this sign posted right there in the beginning, and you see, like, there was one inmate right there. There's one inmate framed on the left, right by close up to you, and I felt like that really helped tell you, like, okay, there's going to be some different weird stuff you're going to have to deal with in the level. And as you sort of round the corner here, you already see, like, the shining from around the corners of the statues. You see the shining light of the Boy of Silence. So that gave us a whole opportunity to, and a really, also, here's the other great thing, because you hadn't really dealt with this sort of thing before, this kind of combat design in the game before, we were able to really make the best use of this really big space to fight, to have your first fight against these enemies, and you get a sense it's sort of like a training ground for fighting them for the first time. And yeah, so it worked really well to do that. Also, this really large kind of positive shape in the middle of the negative space provided a really nice flow for combat. Like when you're being chased by a horde, you frequently want to back up and put distance between you. So already the pillars would help with that were already in the level, but this whole cluster of objects together provided a really good sort of central point to sort of navigate around while you fought. And then again, after this, we dressed up the space with Steve dressed up the space with a lot of wreckage because the thing was falling apart after, if this was supposed to be, and you didn't know it, but this was supposed to be the Comstock House of 1984, that means it had been, for 72 years, it had been falling apart and being destroyed also by the more destructive of the inmates, I guess, really. So then, yeah, then I put in the elevator here so that you could really quickly have this direct connection between your objective, which you investigate and you press the button, and then the elevator comes down. That gave me a moment to, again, introduce more narrative stuff in the elevator. And then you go up. And right when you came here, I thought to myself, the benefit of having this in the center here was that instead of just being stuck in the side all the time looking at the middle and never really going into it, like the only time you were in it in the original version was on the base floor. But now I made this system where, or this layout where once you came in, we had you come up, and like I said, this layout gave us all these opportunities to block the player when we needed to block them, to force them to experience the narrative in the order we want them to experience it in. So in other words, like I built this originally this way. So probably when this was a functioning place, you know, this side of the elevator door, it's a two-sided elevator. This side was probably open when it came up here and let you out. And up here, this is where that giant gate was that later we were attacked from after we opened the security door. So that was shut. So it gave us all these opportunities to first build the space like it was a real space, and then to close off areas we didn't want the player to have access to yet. So that's sort of, I think that's a really good way to build in general. I still try to build spaces that way so they seem plausible first, and then you find ways that make sense in the environmental narrative of the space and also in the storytelling narrative to you know, to open or close doors or not block the player or block the player. So for example, let me just hit play again. And I have some cues here. Okay, so here we are. So yeah, so this is blocked when you first come up. You come up here. This is where the light was from the first Boy of Silence. I also liked that the exit off the elevator gave us this perfect chance to like perfectly frame your next like encounter with the Boys of Silence. And then, like I said, normally when this place was functional, you could walk around this atrium at any time. There would be no impediments to doing that. But then because this place is falling apart, it gave us the opportunity to like, for me to suggest to the level architect, you know, like where we could block off the player's path. So now this becomes a dead end, but it's a dead end with things like, I think we had a kinetoscope in here. This is really dark. We had a kinetoscope over here that you could watch those little movies. You could find a few scant supplies in this area. So this closing and opening of a realistic kind of layout gives you those moments where you can do that. If you go right, this is where you saw that the operating that sort of operating / torture area here. And then you're at this point your critical path leads you through there. It leads you through the sleeping area, which is kind of nice. And then I didn't build all the sleeping areas. I kind of was focusing on the atrium here. But then you come out the sleeping area here, and you reemerge into this space. And at this point, again, we close off. This elevator is closed off, but now you have like this nice kind of like reveal of like the sort of security facade of the security office. And the whole time you're going around the space, again, what's kind of nice is you can always see the atrium in the middle. So we have these like constant reminders of like where you can go, where maybe you can go in the future. So like it all connects in your mind. You mentally map the space better, which again, because this is fairly linear, it's not as disorienting, but it's always a good idea to work that way, at least because like it makes the player feel more immersed in the level when it makes sense like that. And when also I think it helps a lot when you can show areas they can't reach before they can reach them. I've seen kind of newer designers design things without thinking that way, thinking of how the spaces interrelate that way, and again, sort of creating more of a corridor experience, which is really, it's not fun, it's not as memorable, the player doesn't feel as invested in it. There's definitely moments for the corridor things, but I feel like when you can avoid it, better not to. Yeah, so then we come here, and then again, we force the player to go in different directions. We find the security office is gated off, and then I believe, I didn't place it, but I believe there's a blockage over here in this corner, and then the player goes around this side, and yeah, they circle around and around and around, and then this is blocked off, and then they go through here. Originally, this was a door, I think, and then we go into the workshop area, and then we circle around through the indoctrination area, and then we come back, and we emerge. If I can jump this. This is a little high of a... Yeah, actually that's... Unfortunately, that's too high of a... I'm going to have to fix that in the blockout later, but that's too high of a railing. But yeah, so when they come to the railing on this side, Yeah, that's all too high. Anyway, yeah. So finally, when they emerge, when they pull the security switch, we actually open all these gates. Like now, these gates are open, and they reemerge into the space directly from the warden's office into the main atrium, and they have a fight across this space, which is kind of fun. And then they can go down, and then at this point, like I said in the playthrough, the door is now open, and I feel like there's some things that are mysterious, and it's okay. Like now there was a voxophone in here, and I think that was kind of neat. It's almost like there's all these mysterious things going on in this level, like there's the inmates wandering around doing strange things. Like for all you know, an inmate wandered around and placed the voxophone there. For all you know, old Elizabeth came through a tear and placed it there. Like there's a million reasons why it could have happened, but I like that we don't really explain it. Yeah. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about for the Blockout. I pretty much made this just so I could kind of easily walk through and showcase some of the, or talk about some of the topics that made sense. Yeah, Benito, that is kind of like, yeah, I started liking doing that preliminary showing of an inaccessible area before, earlier, like in my mod work, and then I found it worked out pretty well here too. So, okay, so next up, I'm going to go back to the slides a bit to talk a little more. So let's just do that really quickly. Okay. All right, back to the presentation. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about encounter design, and at this point, I remembered that during development, we called this this ruined version of Comstock House Dark Comstock. Like I think actually the level in Unreal was called Dark Comstock, okay, so we had some archetypes to work with. We had the guard, which you find a few times in Comstock House. They wear kind of a jumpsuit. They pretty much have, I think it's just a submachine gun. Pretty simple, ranged attacker. We have the inmates, and we have the Boys of Silence. And I had to balance these limited behaviors in sort of a proper pacing to have like a nice back and forth, have some good environmental storytelling so they made sense when they appeared. Yeah, and just a decent amount of variety. So again, the guard behavior was he was ranged, he could patrol, he could attack on sight. These are the options available to me. In the final version, like for instance, I didn't end up using the guard patrolling. They actually appeared like in direct response to different things, like to the security turrets going off, or to you pulling the switch to open the door. The inmate, we knew that we wanted them to be melee attackers. They'd pretty much just pull like a stick out from behind their back and attack you. They could be patrolling. That was a possibility at the time. What they would be doing, who knows? Custom animations. We knew that would be useful as well to tell their story. Like in the level, you see them beating their head against the wall, crying into their masks, things like that. So we knew we would have to use those to tell the story that these people were losing their minds, pretty much because of Elizabeth's sort of abuses of her power, leading them to being stuck between realities. And that last part was something that wasn't originally in the story. It was more just these were inmates, and we didn't know exactly how we were going to convey why they lost their mind or anything like that. And finally, the Boys of Silence, which was a big question mark. We didn't know what to do with these guys. That was kind of a huge issue that we had to work out, because they were going to be a really memorable, strange, probably the strangest thing you're going to see in as a character in Comstock House. So, when planning the Boys of Silence encounters, they were originally designed as a fully mobile AI enemy. They would use a nav mesh, they could be scripted, they could patrol, that kind of thing. Seen here is some early concept art. about them. They would kind of wander around the level, and then the idea was they would react to the player's sounds, and we would have effects that would make it look like the large conical shapes on their head would be absorbing any sounds the player makes. So the noisier the player were, the more sound they would be like kind of absorbing, and they would clearly be kind of like gaining power from that and start shaking and stuff like this. And finally, when the player generated too much noise, they became really unstable, and they just kind of exploded in a shock wave. And you can see in the drawing there, in the illustration, the original point of their mouth was this huge like sonic shockwave attack would come out of their mouth. That was the way they were originally planning on working. But after iteration and during production, it was determined that this attack behavior was unclear to players. They didn't really know what was going on with this character, and further iteration on it would wasn't really necessary given all the other demands of all the other enemies in the game, and also they didn't. There wasn't enough chance to use this character elsewhere in the game, at least in this point in production. So it's one of those kind of production needs where sometimes you wonder why people make decisions in a game, and oftentimes the decisions are not made in a vacuum. They're not made with a limitless amount of time and money. And in this case, it was that, well, we can't have a full enemy. Maybe in a different world, a different reality, you could have a fully functioning, like full-on AI version of this enemy, but it just wasn't going to work. So we had to come up with a more creative use of it that could still deliver, deliver a unique and memorable experience. So I was told at this point that they were redesigning this character as a security camera. He would have a skeletal mesh. He would look like a humanoid, but he would be just an actor, a level design ingredient, if you will, that I could place in the level in a static location. I could determine the angles that he would look at. I could determine the intervals he would look at them at, how long he would pause, how long he would move, things like this, the order at the different points he would look at. But it would be a security camera. So that was interesting, but it brought up some other questions. When the security camera Boy of Silence sees things, what does he do? That was unknown too. The thought was, well, he would scream and set off an alarm, but like it wasn't really known what that meant. Did it meant that he alerted, the guards? Did it meant that he alerted the inmates? And then again, if the inmates were already wandering around and being like attacking zombies, did it really matter that they had an alarm that set them off? Like it became like kind of a strange situation. And then also, once the Boy of Silence detects the player and they scream, what happens afterwards? Like, because they're not an AI, they can't die, they can't run away. That was a big question mark as well. So we needed a new solution that answered all these problems, and also narratively, I thought anyway, it should narratively link directly the Boy of Silence and the inmates. The guards, I thought, well, the guards are guards, they're going to act human. If they hear the Boy of Silence scream, they're going to come running, and they do in that final jump scare moment. So that wasn't really a problem we had to solve, but I thought linking them to the inmates was definitely a higher priority. So when I sort of self-brainstormed on this, I went back to an old idea. When I applied to work at Irrational Games, one of the questions on the design challenge, they had you do a lot of different design challenges. And a little bit of background on that I'll get into later. I was actually hired at Irrational Games to work on a co-op mode for that game, which was in development for about a year. And then there was way too many demands from the single-player side of the game. That needed more staff members to work on it, to finish it. So all of the designers, including me, were brought over from the co-op game to work on the single-player. And anyway, during that test, one of the challenges was we were designed to come up with this idea of what if in the original BioShock, the character of Sandra Cohen had a fourth disciple that you were tasked to assassinate. I had to come up with a hypothetical new character that had that actually was a special kind of splicer that had special abilities. I had to design a story-based combat encounter with them. So I had this idea that his fourth disciple was a ballet dancer. And let's see, the ballet dancer's name, see if I can find it here, was Anna. Yes, okay. Anna Wingate. There we go. Yes, so anyway, she was a ballet dancer because all the disciples of Sandra Cohen, they had kind of, each one of them had like their own artistic background and discipline, right? So this one was a ballet dancer. The idea was she had a studio, a dance studio in Colombia. And after the fall of Rapture, she and all of her dance troops became splicers, right? They abused the plasmids, and they'd become psychotic like all the other splicers. And now they become a murderous dance troupe. So your quest was to go in and find Anna Wingate, and also you found as you arrived that she had a special kind of plasmid that you could get. So when you arrive at her dance studio, you pass in through an area where musicians played at Area A. They played the harps to accompany the dancers in dance studio on the stage. Sorry, at D. The audience would sit at B. But now when you enter, you find that there's a whole bunch of mannequins and dance poses just frozen across the audience, the flat audience floor of the dance hall. And on the stage, you see in a flash of teleportation effects, you see Anna Wingate appear at D. She says some things to you. She taunts you. She says, "Did Sander really send his errand boy to dance with us?" And then she disappears in a flash, revealing this special vigor on the stage. So the creepy idea I wanted to have was that you had to walk through these like mannequins that were in these dance poses. You had to like weave your way through them to reach the stage and get the vigor. And as you get near certain groups of mannequins, you find that some are not mannequins at all, but they're actually members of the murderous dance troupe, and they come to life and attack you like thug splicers. So I wanted this like tension of like you didn't know what was real and what was not real. It wasn't like, I'm sure the design had problems. It was more like a premise for an encounter design. But then eventually, after that creepy moment of like wandering through the stage to get to, or wandering through all the mannequins to get to the stage, you would get the vigor and win. So yeah, the creepy atmosphere was derived from that. So I still love that idea of these creepy characters, and you don't know why they're there, and you don't know why they're not attacking you, and you have a tension of not knowing when they're going to attack you. So like I still had that in my mind, and it was kind of an incredible coincidence that we came up with a possible use of this general kind of idea. So the way it was set up, of course, was the inmates, you move through the inmates in an enclosed, relatively small space, larger at the beginning here. So we had this one tear effect in the game that if we played the VFX on a mesh, it would do this like static and shuddering effect. So first I decided to say like, well, what if the reason the inmates, like what if like, you know, they're mannequins, so they're immune and unresponsive. So that was an easy thing to do. Once they spawned in, I would script them so that they wouldn't take damage and they wouldn't respond to the player. And they'd just be playing one of the animations we had on them. So that was easy. Then I thought like, well, what happens when you hit them? And then I put an effect on the characters that we'd had for elsewhere in the game where they had the shimmering effect. So it was hinting that like, okay, there's weird tear shenanigans going on here, weird tear effects going on in these characters. And then when you hit them with, when they took damage, I scripted it so they'd do this like, they'd play a different tear effect that we had, which was this weird kind of warp ripple effect, like almost like you weren't really affecting them because they weren't really in your reality at this point. So that was like a cool narrative way we have of explaining why they weren't responding to you. It's almost like they didn't even see you because they weren't really looking in your reality. Meanwhile, the Boy of Silence scans for intruders, and he'd be placed in like a perfect location, well, the best location we could find in the spaces we had, to allow you spots to stealth by them and things like that. And then the idea was once you alerted the Boy of Silence, they scream, and then this is important because we had to figure out what would happen to them once they went off. They couldn't just stay there, so they disappeared. But the cool thing is when they disappear, they actually leave a tear behind, which looks like a glowing white version of the tears that you hear Elizabeth's audio through. So the nice thing about that is that tells a story. It tells at least a hint of a story through the VFX and the science fiction of it, which is that somehow the Boy of Silence kind of controls tears. Maybe not to the level of Elizabeth, but they escape through a tear, and then in doing so, they shift reality in a way where suddenly, the inmates are fully in your reality and they see you and react to you, and the glowing in their eyes and the VFX, they communicate the fact that they've kind of been activated, and maybe the Boy of Silence is seeing through their eyes. We don't know. It links it back to the original location of the Boy of Silence. So it plays with this multiversal terror idea. And it gives a really cool narrative, and it gives a creepy stealth experience all at once. So I feel like that was sort of it's one of those things. Sometimes when you have like limited resources, you come up with some more clever solutions that provide memorable experience in and of themselves. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. I hope that was fun for you guys. I hope that answers most of your questions about the level anyway. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to shoot them my way. What time are we at? We're at 2 o'clock. We could keep this going for a little while. Most of our other sessions went on until about 2:30, but we could do that. Mar Simon, it might be a bit much to ask, but is it possible to have access to the recreation project Blockout for study purposes? Yes, I fully intend to do that. As soon as I fix a few small bugs, including that railing height, which ended up being a little too high, this will be downloadable, and there will be a link. As I said before, all these live streams are archived on the Level Design Learning YouTube channel. So if you get a chance, as always, I hate to say it, but like and subscribe to that. At least subscribe. That's actually because regular content will be posted there periodically, including, I will manage to find a place to put the links to things like, at least in the comments on the, probably in the comments on the video, I'll post a Google Drive link or some other hosting link for the Blockout. Yep. But if there's any questions I missed before, please feel free to post them. I can scroll through this a little bit and see if I missed anything. That's right. Subei, a couple things. Procedent said there's a lot of symmetry when it comes to architecture in this game. I guess it's the Art Deco style also. Actually, not to be a nitpicker, but Art Deco was the style of the architecture in the first BioShock, because that took place, well, it was built like in that period, 30s and 40s. BioShock Infinite takes place before Art Deco. It takes place in 1912. So we had a couple major influences on the architecture in BioShock Infinite. One was a major influence that was cited was the Columbia Exposition, the World's Fair, that took place around that time. It had kind of a neoclassical style. Also, Art Nouveau was a major influence as well. Those are the two biggest influences on the art style. Sub AI had also asked, I feel like at least I'm the level director for the portfolio. Normally it doesn't have to be that way, right? Is that the question you asked about the portfolio? I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you meant by that. But for your portfolio, yeah, you basically have to think like you're the level director for it. Anyway, let me scroll back down. Okay, so while you're designing a level on the first blockout or on paper, thank you. Do you talk to the quest designer, etc., whether we should animate here or not, or is it decided after it's a bit playable? Right. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit. It's been different at different studios. Normally there's kind of, well, what they would call like a high-level structure to the story. Like it's sort of like if you look at macro beats then micro beats, right? Like if you think of it like a story with chapters, like each chapter is kind of a level, right? Like as you play through BioShock Infinite, you start off with the first chapter being like the introduction, like to Columbia with the lighthouse, and then arriving at the sort of baptism, like that's the intro, the entry to Columbia. And the next chapter is like the exploration of Columbia. I forget what area that was called, like the town center kind of thing. And then like the carnival, and then it finally, the next chapter that is sort of like when combat starts, like when you see the racist, the terribly racist spectacle on the stage, and then combat begins. Like that starts the next chapter, and then you go to Boardwalk, and then, you know, and so on and so forth. So it's like that's the structure you're given, and then from there you break it down into like, okay, again depending on the game, but say like I also worked on Gotham Knights, so like in Gotham Knights we had a high-level story structure there. And it was broken down to like, okay, we know we need one part of the story at Blackgate Prison. So then it's like, okay, Patrick, go and put together a blockout for Blackgate Prison. And then we know, in that mission, like for instance here, I'll come back to BioShock. Here, like we know, like, okay, we know that in this chapter, the player travels through reality to visit a dark version of Comstock House. And they go on an adventure trying to rescue Elizabeth and discovering a possible evil future. So then from there it becomes like, okay, what happens on the way up to, you know, from the bottom of the floor to the top of the floor? And then you might start planning out on paper like the beats of what happens. I didn't have that much control over that in this level, like to plan out completely what happens. Like I didn't say, you're going to go through a workshop, you're going to see an operating theater, you're going to see you know, a sleeping quarters. I didn't have that. It was more like I know they have all these spaces they want. I'm gonna plan out where they are, like the overall structure. That's why, you know, like when I showed the atrium blockout, that's why I showed I know where all these spaces are relative to each other in the larger layout of the level, so it makes sense as this place would work as a functioning, you know, high-rise asylum kind of. So that's kind of how I plan that stuff. You also asked, how do you think a level design portfolio should be? Would it be boring to describe all the project stages, or would it be better to show the level directly? There's on my Twitter account, I had recently posted the portfolio page of an intern we had at Warner Brothers Games Montreal. She had one project from school on her portfolio page, but she documented her thought process and her design process, I tried to do here, like her challenges, what she did to meet those challenges. She did a really good job in detail describing top to bottom this one level, and a couple things. One, it was a cool idea for a level, that helps. And two, she described really well what she had to do to make it cool. So I think my answer is definitely, it's not boring. Describe in detail what your thought process is. Like I talked a little bit about my Rational Games hiring test. They gave me that design challenge of like, design a story mission around Sandra Cohen's Fourth Disciple. involve a detailed description of the enemy types, the special enemy types. You know, like they gave you these criteria, and then you had to plan it out and see. You had to prove that you were good at making a cohesive, entertaining experience of this combination of narrative, combat, layout design, things like that. So the thought process is the biggest thing they're trying to divine from you, to extract from your brain when you do these things. So your portfolio should definitely show that, because they want to know that you think about design in the right way. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. So Mar Simon says, when creating a portfolio piece, what would you like to see? I guess I just kind of said that. Should we make a level the size of what you showed on UE, or should we make something the size of the entire level? Keep it small for a portfolio, small and like very refined. Small and more refined and detailed is better than large, because the larger you get, the less you're going to be able to bring up to a higher level of completion and coherence throughout. So I would keep it smaller. If you watch Steve Lee also on YouTube, I know he said this a few times, like, keep it small, don't make it too big, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely something you should do. And again, blockouts alone, like, here's the interesting thing. Blockouts alone, I said this before and I'll say it again. Whatever you're doing, when you're building levels, you want to build things. It sounds a little sad, but it's absolutely necessary and true. Studios are basically they're wanting to hire people who already worked on their game. And when I say that, I mean the work in your portfolio should be as directly relevant to the game you're applying for. It's that simple, because someone who's more relevant to what game they're applying for, like, they're probably going to get the job if they're also equally good at expressing themselves. So, yeah. Yeah, I forget why I brought that up, but yeah, that's totally true. But anyway, yeah, so I'd mentioned Steve Lee, and yeah, he was saying to keep things small, but also, like, I think he did a level in Source for Half-Life, so he made a shooter level, so that's really good. I know what I was going to say. Sorry, I came full circle to this. Yeah, so for blockouts, say you want to apply for multiplayer games, right? Then a blockout's a much bigger deal, because you are going to be building that map. Like, you are going to be building it to certain gameplay metrics, certain game mode metrics, combat metrics, all kinds of things. Like, and you will need to show that in your blockout. So, you know, it's really cool. Like, I know, like, Unreal Engine Fortnite just came out. Like, there's an example for a multiplayer game. I know there's others. I'm not up on all of them anymore. But yeah, so that's where blockout's going to be king. But other than that, if you're building for single player, you're going to need to show like a cohesive mix of, like, scripting, narrative, encounter, all that kind of stuff, and just technical stuff as well. Yeah, so, like, my first, not to go too much into my own past experiences, but my first job was working on Wolfenstein multiplayer. So that's one of those things, like, I got hired there because I had the good fortune of applying for a company, and I got rejected a lot of places before that, but that was a good fit. My IdTech maps were of fairly high quality, where that studio had also used that technology, and they'd also built for multiplayer, and I was building for multiplayer in actually Jedi Academy at the time. And so it was directly relevant for what they were doing. So I got hired originally based on map making. I didn't originally do single player scripting or any of that stuff. I learned that later at other jobs, just by having to learn on the job. So, okay, so I'm going to go back to the questions. Before you doing the blockout, do you draft something on paper, or the blockout is basically that? I might organize my thoughts on paper. I haven't often, like, presented a full, like, detailed blockout in 2D. Oftentimes I find that I work backwards, and you can find several other level designers who say this thing, but it's like you need to find the hook or the memorable moment. By hook, I mean like the thing that ties it all together, like the room in the Big Lebowski, like the rug in the Big Lebowski, that kind of thing. In this case, like for me, it was like, okay, it starts with the elevator and everything goes out from the elevator. Everything goes out from the atrium and the elevator. Like that's your hub. And I want everything to flow back out and back into it. So often then, like once I go from there, you've seen me post before some level design documents, and they are really good. Actually, once you get to a certain point, maybe even after you blocked out a bit, it's good to like document your block out in a level design document, because what that does is it communicates all the needs, because you're not doing this alone in a vacuum. You desperately need all the help of the highly skilled people on your team to bring it to life. VFX, audio, lighting, level art, gameplay programmers, combat designers, like everything. You need to bring it. They need to bring that to life. So you need to express, like in a document at that point, what happens where. That's really important. In this one here, it was kind of odd because like there were a lot of motives outside of my own that were driving the whole level forward. So like I said, I just had to provide that high level structure. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, someone who does story-driven kind of level applying for level design for a shooter game might not be what they are looking for. Right, or say you do, I don't know, Warcraft maps or RPG stuff, but you're applying for like an Infinity War job. Like that's obviously not the right thing. So I mean, that's kind of that's not the problem, but it's a bit of a paradox that can occur in some of the actual like design programs, like not all of them, but some of them. And I've looked at student portfolios and I'm not sure if it comes from a mix of sometimes it's the student's interests or sometimes it's the way their program is taught, or it's a mix of both. But I'll see like a smattering of like a whole bunch of student projects, and they're like kind of prototypes, and it's like the student portfolio becomes rather vague. It's not targeted enough to the jobs they want to look for, so they go with kind of a scattershot approach. They try to be all things to all men, as the saying goes, or the Swiss Army knife of level designers or game designers. Or they sometimes say they're level designers / game designers. Or they say they're level designers / level artists. And it's like, it's good to know the way the roles work, the way they're differentiated in production. And to be fair, when I'm talking, I have to reiterate that I'm talking about AAA. And the way things tend to be delineated in the responsibilities there. That's why, again, I come back around to what I said before about keeping it simple, keeping it focused on the kind of project you're best at, that you like the most. That's also important. You should love what you're doing. Like if you wanted to work on like multiplayer shooters, if you wanted to work on Apex Legends, and you start off on a mobile game, to me that sounds, not to diss mobile games, but if that was your love, was like multiplayer stuff, or maybe it's like competitive multiplayer, like Counter-Strike or something like that, then you're going to be sad working on a mobile game. And yeah, it's a job, and we all have to start somewhere. But I feel like if you can focus more early on, it's always better. Okay, so before doing the blockout, okay, were you free in these projects, such as placing a discovery point where you wanted, or were you under constant control? Well, like I said, in this particular game, in this particular level, I had a little more leeway to determine the critical path. Like the endpoints were set for me, but I had to decide how you get there and what you see along the way. So like I said, that's why I tried to explain in the original blockout mock-up that the endpoints were set. You find door, you find switch to door, you have adventure on the way to switch. And, you know, the thing that I liked also was the question also is, do you have an adventure on the way back to the switch? And the answer was like, since this is an interlude, no. So that also like gave me the freedom to figure out like, okay, the pacing could be better controlled by riding the elevator back down when you're done. It's that kind of design you see in a lot of games where, you know, you go around it. You say you're on a main path. You go around in a circle off the main path. You have like an adventure, ups and downs, drama, tension, and then like when you complete the thing, you find the thing you needed to get from off the main path. You just kind of drop back down right into the main path, like right next to where you found the thing. That's pretty good because it gets to the point. So I feel like that's the kind of control I had, but not like the reasons you were going to the roof, right? Or the top of the building. So okay, so now we have I like FPS and linear TPS games. For this, I'm about to design 2 levels and 1 Uncharted and other COD style MP level. I think I'm on the right track. Yeah, but again, that's even 2 levels. Watch your scope. But I'm happy to hear you're staying with the stuff that you're loving. That's good. In level design, do you think it's necessary to add it in the art section to provide the atmosphere? Oh, add art in. Okay. That's a good question. I argue that, here's the thing. I argue that in the blockout phase, and there's a certain balance here, but more art indication is better than less. What it does is, here's one of the other things. If you can start thinking about the way the art will be used, especially say you have like an encounter combat design or narrative, right? Just narrative encounter design. You're going to start, hopefully, in an ideal world, and this isn't always true because development's pipelines can get out of whack and out of order, but in an ideal world, you should be able to do your play testing with actual gameplay systems and AI and stuff in the blockout because it's not as expensive to change things at that point. Art passes haven't been done yet. Like, it feels good in the blockout. But also, like, as a level designer, I like to try to add what I can. If I have ideas how to contribute to the story, I like to add in art things. Like, for example, if I go to, I'm going to go back to the UE5 window. If I go right here, you know, like I even added like spotlights and stuff at times to showcase, like, to indicate things I wanted. Like, say this is a high security area, like the lead up to like the security office. So I'd place like floodlights in to make it look like, you know, and then I'd put like, again, I put the security turrets up on top of those posts. So I would put in indications of all the stuff that I could to make it seem plausible, because one of the things you're going to have to do is whatever you build, you're going to have to make the art team and other teams buy into it. So you're all on the same page. And it doesn't always work. Like, sometimes I've put in things in a level and art has very different ideas for, you know, what they want to do with it. There was some stuff in Gotham Knights that I had an idea of, like some stuff about the last mission in the main mystery of the game. And I thought I had ideas for the way that the final combat and traversal encounter should take place. And they kept my block out. Like, the layout was the same, the path you took was the same, but the theming of it, the art theming of it, changed from one thing to a completely other thing. And, you know, that's the art direction's call. Like, that's not your call as a level designer. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be trying to, like, justify why things are what they are. You can't just build things in a weird like neutral vacuum. Like, what's that game? There's some shooter games that are like really, they're all about gameplay. Is it Super Hot? Is that one? I can't remember. But there's some games where the shooting takes place in just a really like, the space you're shooting in is just, it's built for shooting. It's built for traversal or whatever, right? Yeah, and that's fine. You can do whatever you want for those spaces, right? They just have to obey the movement mechanics and the firing mechanics, stuff like that. In fact, way back when, there's some other multiplayer games that do that too. Yeah, like there was an old game called Monday Night Combat that did that as well, where it was built almost like a game show. So you could build any layout you wanted that suited the game mechanics. But anyway, I always say, like, honestly, I'll have other pictures of my blockouts coming down the pike later, but this is not what you're seeing here. Is honestly, this is, even though I recreated this from the main game, this is pretty typical of how I would do my blockouts. It really is. And it's not always necessary, but I feel like if I built this and nobody could tell what it was supposed to be, they could misinterpret it, build the wrong thing, and then we'd have to like go through another round of iteration because maybe they broke my combat mechanics. Like they didn't know why I needed like that platform up there where the turrets would be, or they wouldn't know why I needed staircases, or there could be all these reasons. So I feel like if it makes sense even in the blockout phase, it's like it's better for everybody. And when I was a commercial artist as well, I found like I would never want to show people somebody a half-baked idea because they get the wrong impression. And when there's a lot of money involved and time in AAA development, you don't want that. So I feel like getting ahead of the game helps you there. All right, so let me see. Let me go back to my camera. Okay, so all right, so let's see. We got President said Prosidur, sorry. That's my problem. Also, I worked for 3 years on an indie platform 2D game, but I would like to work on FPS, DPS, linear open world games. It's hard to get my foot in. Okay, yep. Okay. All right. I think that's it. I think we're going to end at this point. It's about 2:30. Any other questions you guys have at this point? You can feel free. I'm on Twitter. I think I'm linked. My links for Twitter are here on Twitch as well. If you guys want to send me DMs, my DMs are open. Feel free. That's not a problem with me. Eventually, I'm hoping to maybe start doing some mentoring sessions, but I have to look into that a little more. But for now, I'm happy to answer any quick questions you might have. But again, thanks so much for showing up today. This has been really fun for me. I really enjoyed showing this and sharing this with you guys. It's been fun for me as well, just like revisiting the level after all this time. And yeah, again, this will be up on YouTube on the Level Design Learning channel to check out later if you ever want to go back and revisit it.